In today's Mass, in the first reading, we hear from the prophet Isaiah very consoling and comforting words from God for us. Comfort, comfort, O my people, are the first words that the Lord tells us through the prophet Isaiah in today's reading. And later on he says that that the Lord desires to gather us into his arms and carry us as his little lambs. Really, the great gift of Advent spiritually is that it inspires us, it reminds us, it calls us to recognize that we are utterly dependent on God as a child is dependent on its mother, as a lamb is dependent upon its shepherd, you might say. God shows this to us in a radical way by actually becoming a child in Jesus Christ. Jesus submitted himself to all of the normal needs of a child, just as we did when we were children. We needed our mothers as babies. We were helpless without them. And so was the infant Jesus. And in a spiritual way, this is just as true for us now, that we need to always be returning every day, really, not just during Advent, to this recognition of our need for God. Turning to God in humility of heart and admitting our need for him frees us from the burden of trying to figure everything out by ourselves, trying to create our own happiness, our own perfection. As long as we live with this idea that we have to be the arbiters of our own happiness, our own fulfillment, we're not letting God really come into our hearts. We're not really preparing a way for him in our hearts and acknowledging that he is the one who is to come and give us rather, our happiness and our fulfillment, that he is our happiness, our fulfillment. And thus we are freed from this burden of self, as some monastic writers have put it. That is ultimately pride, the idea that we are the ones who have to determine our own fulfillment, but ultimately it is Christ who does this. When we allow Christ's love to heal our heart and remove our sinfulness, then we live in a place of freedom and joy and peace, and also we are greater able to spread love and peace and joy to others. The greatest gift that we can give to anyone this Christmas, and the greatest gift we can give to ourselves, is a heart that has been transformed by the peace, the love, and the joy of Christ. That is ultimately what all of the joy of Christmas is directing us towards, though it can generally sometimes be directed towards being with the family, time off from work, or just the good memories and the sense of peace and security that comes with all of our memories and traditions of the Christmas season. But really the great gift, the great joy that is being communicated to us through this season, particularly in the liturgy and in the prayers of the Church, is the joy of receiving Christ into our hearts and allowing him to transform us, and then sharing that love with others. That is the great gift of Christmas. And throughout the season of Advent, we do well to prepare our hearts to receive that gift. This Advent, let us seek out the sacrament of reconciliation. It is there in a special way that we receive the tender, fatherly, merciful love of God. Then, filled with God's grace and the joy of being forgiven, let us preserve and nourish that relationship with God through prayer and through seeking the good of our brothers and sisters. And indeed, the more that we turn to Christ in our hearts, that we seek to listen to his voice, that we seek to be close to him through the sacraments, through prayer, through reading the scriptures, the more that we do that, naturally, in ways that we don't even try to do, that we can't even predict, God will pour out, his love will pour out from our hearts into the lives of others, just by his grace working within us. The way that we look at others, the way that we think about others, and thus the way that we treat them, can't help but be different when our heart is more and more filled with the love of Christ.